we are almost live. And we're live! Hey, everybody. Okay, look who I found. Paul Thurrott, everybody. I found him.
How's it going?
Oh, it's going.
Yep. Time is passing.
Time is passing, and that's all we can do right now.
All the good we can say.
All right. Luckily, there's a lot of tech news this week.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff to cover. So let me pull up therrott.com as a reference.
Speaking of which, what do I get?
Oh, Mahedi's leaving?
Yeah, he's got to do his internship. Wow, look at that. What the hell?
What happened?
I've had this monitor for since last August. Yeah, that's exactly how long I've had it. And it has all these connections on the back. So there's like USB connections so you can plug in devices and stuff.
Okay.
So I plugged the USB-C cable in there, like literally USB-C to USB-C.
Okay.
And I figured this would be a good way to connect phones to the computer, and I would free up a port. But it never ever made that connection. Like it would charge the phone, but so I just left it plugged in. I'm like, screw it, it's a nice little. Yeah, Windows wouldn't see it. It's just like a charger, which is fine. Like in fact, I just plugged in a phone to it just to charge it. I don't need to access it on my computer. But I got the little notification, like something happened, and it's.
Hold on, Paul.
Yep.
Hold on.
Okay. That's so weird. Huh. That's never happened. Oh, that's interesting. So, how does that work? Oh, fuck. Let me guess. This isn't charged, is it? Oh, look at you. Look at you.
Sorry, that was bizarre. I heard like children at my doorstep and nobody's there. All right. Sorry, Paul.
Nope, it's okay.
Sorry. I was like, what the hell's going on? All right, so we're live. We're good there. All right. You ready to start?
Yep.
Okay. Let's do this. In 3, 2, and 1. What the Tech is brought to you by Text Expander. Text Expander helps you communicate smarter. Visit textexpander.com/podcast for 20% off your first year. Everybody, welcome to What the Tech. I'm Andrew Zarian. Of course, I'm joined by Mr. Paul Thurrott. How you doing, Paul?
Pretty good.
That's all that we can hope for. That's all
I know.
we can hope for right now.
So that's as good as it's getting.
Crazy times, but we're here. We're doing a show. A lot of tech to talk about. Paul, how's your week been? Good? Hanging in?
Andrew, I'm not exaggerating when I say, yeah, I get up every day. Let me think about this. I think it was this morning. I woke up laying in bed and I thought, thank God it's the weekend. Oh, right. It's just the way it is. Yeah, it's just not, I don't know. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
What are you going to do?
How about you? I'm going to tell you, we're getting closer to opening here in New York. We're in phase 1 now. I think on Friday, 5 different counties are going to go to phase 3, upstate New York. Long Island probably going to phase 3. Long Island, Westchester going to phase 3 in about, 10 days, 11 days from today. So, things are it's opening up. So we'll see. We're at the end of this. Just hang on tight, guys.
Well, we're at the beginning of the end. I mean,
beginning of the end of the end. Yeah.
Yeah. Is it the end of the beginning or the beginning of the end? I mean, we've seen, unfortunately, that in places that have opened up early, they're seeing more cases, So I don't know. It seems like the whole planet wants to just move ahead. It's like, screw it, we've had enough.
Yeah.
Which I kind of get, but we still got to be smart about this.
Yeah. So, I guess we'll start with that big Apple story here, right? Because I really want to talk about this. This is something that you and I have spoken about for, God, since I want to say 9 years, 8 years, that this is what we saw it becoming. We knew as soon as Apple started with the iPhone and with the iPad that they were slowly evolving into possibly having their own chipsets on their MacBook line, their Mac, computer line. And it seems like it's happening. They're going to announce it this year. They're going to announce it at this year's WWDC. I want to get your thoughts on this because this could possibly be great for them because they have their own chip and they're refining the operating system to be more, in tune with iOS and how they handle everything. So I want to get your opinion on this because this is a positive and a negative at the same time. But
okay.
I would have said a couple.
Well, actually, let's start there. Let's start there. Yeah. I mean, I'm curious. What's the negative for you?
The negative is obviously the negative is always going to be performance, right? That's going to be the big question here. But if this was 5 years ago, I think it would have been a tremendous negative.
Right.
If this was their point 5 years ago to say, okay, listen, we're going to transition to our own ARM chipsets. No more Intel. This is going to be the Mac line. There would have been a lot of resistance from the user base because obviously going to Intel was probably part of their big boom here. Obviously it is, but Intel made it more friendly for PC users to go over. Emulation worked better. Overall, everything worked better. But now to kind of take that step backwards, going to ARM, hardware emulation has gotten way better. Software emulation has gotten way better you need to run software. But the reality is, Apple's running their own system anyway, and you're running Apple apps anyway, so why not? I want to get your opinion because obviously we could talk about this and we're going to go into more detail here.
It's a huge topic. I mean,
tremendous.
So there's by the way, we should say, that they may be announcing this next week is based on a report from Bloomberg, which is credible, but they may still not announce it, right? So, it's possible after all this excitement, next week will come and go or whenever, I guess it's 2 weeks from Monday, I think. Sorry, 2 weeks from Monday, or a week from Monday, right? So we're about 10 days away. They may not announce it, but we know they've been working on this, and we know that Microsoft, in partnership with Qualcomm, has brought Windows 10 to ARM, and we can see by the mistakes that they've made and by how well that's gone, the challenges that Apple faces, and we can kind of speculate as to how they might respond to that stuff. So, I think this goes back to the original iPad. Few people remember this, but this was in the Jobs biography. They considered running that thing on Intel. That could possibly have been released as an Atom-based device, right?
Yeah.
And one of the challenges they had was, well, do these A series chips that we have at the time? You can remember this is 10 years ago.
Which 8 series?
Are they powerful enough?
Which one would it have been 10 years ago?
I don't even know, but they might not have even had these names yet because the iPhone had just come out in 2007. So it's 3 gens in, Apple, I don't remember when Apple bought that company. I've forgotten the name now, the company that was making their chips. At that time, well, Apple had probably bought them. In fact, I'm sure by the time that they decided to, off the top of my head, I would have to guess that once they realized they were going to stick with these ARM-based chips for the iPad as well as the iPhone, they probably said, look, we need to, we need to own this company.
Yeah.
And we need to, because they want to innovate in that space as well, because you can aggressively define the hardware and the software, and that's what Apple's all about. But anyway, the ARM chips are designed for mobile devices. And Macs, like Windows-based PCs, are, obviously there's mobile chips, but they're, this is a desktop it's a legacy operating system.
Yeah.
Hey, Andrew.
Yes, sir.
My connection seems fuzzy.
Okay. You want to reconnect?
And I just realized I had to temporarily unplug the Ethernet cable from my computer today. Do you mind if I plug that back in?
Oh, go right ahead. I'll go on a rant here.
Right.
So,
I'll be right
you know, as someone that's a Mac user, it's interesting because this is going to, I think for the lower end devices, if we're talking about, and I'll go into this when Paul comes back too, but when we're talking about, you know, like a MacBook Air or a MacBook like device, do you need to reboot it now?
Sorry.
Okay. Are you back?
Yep.
Oh, there you go. Okay, thank you. So here's a question for you, right? When we're talking about like a MacBook, right, or a MacBook Air, I don't see any problem with this, right? I think having your own chip that's better, I guess, better refined for battery life and is able to kind of do core balancing and things like that. That's made for the operating system specifically. It's not
there are so many unknowns.
There are, tremendous amount, right? But if we're going to go with a positive, but on the
I don't mean it as positive or negative. I mean, this is literally just an unknown. Like, if we're going to speculate, like, where would they start? Yeah, a MacBook would be the place to start, right? Like a low end, entry level device, right?
But the discussion is not necessarily that it's only going to be on those low end devices, right?
That's the unknown. So that's one of the unknowns. There's many unknowns. So one of the things that has come up as Microsoft and Qualcomm have worked to bring Windows 10 to ARM is that these ARM chips do not really work well with these legacy operating systems. And so there's a lot of customization that has to occur. And there's a big performance hit when you try to emulate x86 code. Now, one of the big problems that we've had in the Windows side of the fence is ARM devices can only run 32-bit Intel apps, x86 apps. Yeah. And the vast majority of software out there today is 64-bit. Now, on the Mac side, with which I'm not as familiar, but my understanding is that they have gone completely 64-bit with their Mac operating system at whatever point. I don't know if it's Catalina or before Catalina.
I think it was pre-Catalina.
So Apple, as we know, is very aggressive with this kind of thing. But Apple has also been compiling Mac OS on ARM for several years already on the A series chips, right? So the one benefit that they have, and this is where all the unknowns come in, is they know this is coming down the pike. They've been working on this. They're 64-bit, right? They need to be able to run 64-bit apps. They need to be able to tell developers there's a little switch. It will happen automatically. You recompile your app in Xcode. It will compile out to ARM. It will be native. It will run great, probably. We don't know what kind of progress they made, because one of the big things that could happen here is, because a lot of us, like you said, and I believe this too, I mean, they'll probably start with the notebooks, maybe you could draw the line like pro, non-pro. So like a Mac Mini, a MacBook Air, those things will be on ARM in a year. But the pro devices, they might need more time, or maybe they never come because they're like workstations and they need to be on Intel. Who knows? But one of the big unknowns is what if they've done it? Like what if they can bring the entire product line over? And maybe it doesn't take a year, maybe it's 2-3 years, whatever. But I mean, what if they have literally evolved this thing in secret?
The operating system.
To run, no, the chips.
The chips, okay.
To, like, in other words, like everyone, like one of the things that didn't work on the Windows side was the first generation, actually the first 2 generations technically, of Qualcomm Snapdragon chips that were put in ARM PCs on the Windows side were the same chips they had in smartphones. And they were terrible. They were just terrible. Battery life was epic, but they couldn't run apps at an acceptable speed. So since then, Qualcomm and now Microsoft, in partnership with Qualcomm, have both developed their own separate lines of chips that are kind of a fork of those smartphone chips that have been changed to better meet the needs of like a Windows PC. The battery life goes down. It has to, but the performance goes up.
Yeah.
What if Apple, because Apple doesn't do things publicly, they do it secretly. Apple would have been running this thing on whatever A6, A7, A8, whatever those things are, and said, man, the performance is really terrible because macOS is this legacy system. What if we could evolve the OS and evolve the chipset so that we have special versions of these chips that will be in the Macs? Like, it won't be the same one in an iPhone. Just like in an iPad Pro, you have like a special version of each chip that is, slightly different. These ones, maybe they're dramatically different, right? So honestly, this is what makes it so interesting. We don't know what they're going to announce.
Yeah.
It may be very vague, you know.
I'm
may not.
assuming it's going to be vague. Because here's the other thing, right? You're gonna need an overall operating system redesign here. If this is the direction you're headed, if you are looking at doing your own
that might have already happened. That's my point.
Yeah, no. Yeah, exactly. It might have already happened in secret that we don't know. Yeah. But the current, how the Mac OS functions currently in its current state, I don't see them just having the same operating system and just maybe attempting emulation. Yeah. If they're going this direction, it's going to be a total redesign. We're looking at going back to when they went to OS 10. You know, this is I
don't think they have to do that. I think that OS 10 by nature was cross-platform, and it was one of those things that allowed them to go to Intel. They didn't completely re-architect Mac OS 10 to run on Intel. They just recompiled it. I mean, unless you're an assembly language programmer, like from the perspective of any developer, it's no different. Like it just. So I mean, I have a feeling ARM is going to go similarly, and because they own the ARM chips, I mean, they've been doing this. It's possible whenever they did make that switch to 64-bit, was done in part because ARM is 64-bit and we have to do 64-bit. You know, look, the very least they can do is say, they're not going to do this, but they could come out and say, look, none of that stuff that you have today is going to run. Like none of it. Yeah. But we're going to let developers compile to 64-bit. It's not even a checkbox. It just happens automatically when you get this new version of Xcode. So all the Adobes of the world, everyone who makes apps, Microsoft, et cetera, they don't have to do anything. They just have to recompile it and it will work on ARM. That would be the least they could do. I cannot see them doing that. There has to be, like we see on the Windows side, some form of emulation. And because Apple is natively 64-bit today, it has to be 64-bit emulation, which is something we don't have on the Windows side yet, although they say they're working on it. That comes with an additional performance penalty, by the way, at least on the Windows side. And so again, like you may be right that maybe part of the re-architecting is that they've written like a metal style, layer of the operating system that's designed to run this emulated software at better speeds or something. Who knows? But I really think that for this to work, it's going to require them to extensively evolve their A-series chips specifically for Macs. I think that has to be a huge part of it. And like I said, all we can do is sit here and speculate. I mean, because we really don't know what they're doing exactly. But the range of potential choices here are kind of amazing. Like I'm really curious to see what they do. Yeah.
No, so here's the other thing, right? Off the bat, you know that they're going to whatever this device ends up being, right? Let's say it's a hypothetical MacBook. Let's say, just go with that.
Yep. Yeah, they'll bring back the MacBook brand, small computer.
Yeah, so they'll bring that. Yep. Let's say they bring that back. You know what the big selling point of that thing is going to be? The freaking battery life.
Yes.
I mean, these guys are going to be able to do a real 12-hour battery life.
And by the way, we should point out that one of the big benefits of going to ARM, if they do this, and I think they will, is that it will make running iPad apps, almost seamless and more efficient. And so you'll have this device that has really great battery life. It may run traditional Mac apps like Intel type Mac apps slowly, but it will run like iPad apps full speed.
Yeah.
And maybe this is part of the goal. I mean, the other thing, just not to get out on a weird tangent, but I mean, because this is really getting ahead of ourselves a little bit because we have no idea what they're really doing. But once you have the Mac on ARM, and once you have developers just natively compiling their apps to ARM, theoretically, that means they could run on the iPad Pro.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, iOS is based on Mac OS. I mean, there's iPad. They did just split iPad OS off from iOS. Why did they do that? Maybe they're going to add some stuff into that makes the APIs that are missing from iOS/iPad OS are going to be added to iPad OS, and so you could have I'm trying to think what you would want, like what would be the point of that. But I guess like the desktop version of the Microsoft Office applications, you could get the real Photoshop, the real Illustrator.
Yeah.
And then, that goofy "what's a computer" ad suddenly starts to make sense because this thing could become a computer. So I don't know, maybe, whether that happens or not, but having everything on ARM makes sense for Apple. It's another part of the stack that they can control. They love that. But it's also something they can market to users,
exactly.
that it just works,
But I mean, obviously, like you said, we're getting ahead of ourselves, but maybe the touchscreen MacBook shows up here. Maybe you have, maybe you're able to run the Mac OS on the iPad now. If you want to do like, you may be able to go into Pro mode. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, there's so many different options here that you can once it's using natively the same chipset. Yeah.
One of the when Apple was known to have been working on a tablet, a lot of the early fake pitches that people would make showed a tablet with a Mac OS desktop on it, right? With the Mac OS 10 style dock, and and they were looking at it, the way that Microsoft brought Windows to tablets. They were like, oh, maybe that's what the iPad will be, right?
Yeah.
Of course, the iPad was iOS instead, but
I think it's very interesting that these rumors are, it's actually happening, and it's obviously this. I anticipate this was a leak internally from Apple,
so
let's kind of get people talking right before WWDC.
I mean, of all the stuff we talked about, so remember when Apple was rumored to have been bringing, at the time they were calling them iOS apps, but we'll call them iPad apps, to the Mac. And then that, whatever year that was, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, whenever, they announced this thing, Catalyst. And in the version of Windows 10, in the version of Mac OS that they released that fall, there were 4 apps that were iPad apps that Apple made that were included in the operating system, right? Yeah, it was like Stocks, News, whatever the other 2 were. Doesn't matter. Yeah. And then eventually they brought more. Remember, they brought the Apple Music app, and all that stuff came the next year.
iTunes.
But a year later.
iTunes, Apple Music, podcast app.
Yep. So for what they did was they gave developers basically a year to kind of play with this technology, see how that looked, test it with their devices. And then a year later, they opened it up for everybody. And you and I both believe this was going to be the biggest thing in the world.
Yeah.
And the reality of Catalyst has been kind of underwhelming, right? For some reason. And I think about this. It still seems like such a great idea to me. If you're an Apple guy, you're running these apps, and you have an iPad, you have a Mac, you have a phone, why on earth would you not want to run there are some great apps on the iPad that just aren't available on the Mac otherwise. And, whatever. So it hasn't gone all that well. So I guess what I'm asking is, like, is it possible, like, we're sitting here, like, we're really dreaming up this crazy future. We've gone really kind of far down a road where they might not even go there. I mean, what do you think the least they could possibly do is? Like, in other words, we're like, they're going ARM. They're getting rid of Intel. Like, they're going to bring Mac apps to the iPad. It's crazy. Yeah. What do you think they're really going to do? Like, what's the least amount of, like, for this to meet the needs of the rumor, like, what's the very least they could announce?
The very least that they could announce, maybe a new device.
Yeah, like a specific Mac, like
one specific Mac for this.
And it doesn't offer any compatibility.
No compatibility at all.
No, I mean, I want to say that is a possibility. Their answer might be that the user experience is so terrible that we're not going to do that to you, and they're going to point at Windows 10 and ARM to show why that's the case. And they're going to say, look, this is what we're going to do. We're going to make it completely seamless for developers all they have to do is recompile the app, and it will work on your new computer. And that computer's not coming out for another year. So you have 1 year to watch and see as developers do this. And then when it comes out, the apps will be there. I think that is literally the very least they can do. And I hope to God that's not what it is.
Well, here's why I kind of, here's what I see, right? You have, there's a tremendous amount of people that, like me, they are on the MacBook Pro line, right?
Right.
I have an i9 MacBook Pro sitting in my office, right? I mean, insanity. how can you replicate that? How are you going to be able to say, okay, guys, this new chip, it's not going to be as quick, but, here you go. You're really not. You're not going to.
No, you can't. You can't. No. You can't do that. They have to be able to stand up and show a chart where it says in the most common workloads, this thing is just as fast or faster. Plus, it gets double the battery life or whatever it is. They can't sell a pro class device that doesn't meet what they're already doing, right? They can't.
But
so
majority
that's
of
why
sales.
I think your idea of a MacBook makes sense to me. Bring back the MacBook. It could be the little 12-inch guy, no fans, super efficient, 25 hours of battery life, designed for the executive that just needs the stuff that Apple makes. It's like Mac OS plus iLife plus iWork.
Everything's there.
And that's it.
Yeah, everything's there. Everything is there.
And by the way, there is a little bit of a market. One of the advantages that Apple really has, I guess it's two advantages. It's just the appeal of this company to its audiences. Developers will quickly embrace this, although catalysts should quickly embrace this, and so will their best customers. People will buy this just because it's a new Apple thing and they can't wait to get it.
Yeah, and it sell well. But here's the other problem. Now you got four different operating systems, technically.
Yeah,
right. You got iOS.
Really,
well, three. You got iOS. You have this bizarro thing that you're making.
You have Watch. You have Apple TV. You have.
Yeah.
I know what you're saying. For computing platforms.
Computing platforms. You have three separate computing platforms, and now you have to support with the concept that one of them is getting phased out, and it's the one that everybody's using. So right. What does this do? I mean, as a marketing standpoint, right? As a marketing standpoint, you're essentially telling everybody, hey, by the way, that thing you're using now, in a couple of years, that's going to be gone. So look at this.
You don't say it like that. No. So I think if that's going to happen, then the marketing point is the name of the system doesn't matter. It's going to run all your apps, right? So if the platform goes away, but it still runs all your apps, who cares? It's the same. Whatever. I mean, so this conversation is impossible to have because we're just speculating. We have no idea what they're really going to announce. By the way, that week could come and go with nothing. When that would be miserable if that happened. But
listen, it could be nothing. But this does fall in line with a lot of things. One example, right? Apple is working on the iMessenger, right? The messages, now it's called Messages, but that is still running on the old architecture. They haven't brought over the iOS styling over to this Catalyst. They haven't done that. That's going to be next, right? So right now, if you look at it, all their internal applications are moving over to this platform.
Right.
It's going to be an easy transition for them. I'm thinking out loud here. They're not going to have to redevelop everything as much as people think they will, considering they've been slowly doing this for a couple of years.
Do you foresee any situation in which a future generation of Pro devices, right, which would be MacBook Pros plus iMac, I guess what they have, iMac Pros and Mac Pros, continue using Intel, but they also ship with whatever Apple's A series processor is, right? And that it's a dual system, and that's the only way to get the performance on those things, that they have to use both.
They're going to have to use both.
Does that make sense?
I don't know.
I don't know either.
I don't know what the answer there is. I mean, you're obviously not going to get the performance that you can on an i9 compared to what they could do with their ARM chips, unless we don't know, unless they developed.
I know that's the thing. Unless everyone, and that is literally the thing. What if a future Mac Pro is a dual CPU, A series, whatever, heavily modified, dedicated graphics, and that is powerful enough to take the place of an i7 or an i9? I mean,
what if it's an AMD?
Well, I don't know. This is all about them doing it. I feel like the real impetus for this is them controlling the stack. I mean, why? The reason they went to Intel, and this was the reason they went to PowerPC as well, was that the chipset they were using before and the companies that made that chipset those chipsets, weren't meeting their needs. PowerPC had fallen behind the Intel stuff, and it was getting impossible to hide that. And the power, I think it was the G5 at the time, was so energy hungry, you couldn't make a laptop that got better than a couple of hours of battery life. It just wasn't working. So, Intel was there. Intel, it wasn't like they made special chips for Apple. They just used the same chips we use on the Windows side. This time's a little different because this time it's their own chips. Yeah. They can do whatever they want to these things, and they can make whatever changes are necessary.
Yeah, but they're going to get into the horsepower game, and that's something that Apple doesn't really do. They're not in the pissing contest of talking about the specs of their chips and the performance of as much as what Intel does and what AMD does. Now they're going to get into that segment of user base.
This may, I don't know. We already see such amazing creative apps on the iPad today that this makes the Mac more appealing to that audience, and those apps could perform even better on such a system. We can't. There's no way to definitively speak about any of this because it's not. We just
imagine
don't know
Microsoft.
What they're
Microsoft starts doing it with their own ARM-based chips, their own custom chips now on their Surfaces.
Well, they require Qualcomm. It's a partnership with Qualcomm.
It's a partnership with them, but
this is a huge advantage for Apple.
No, it is a huge advantage for Apple, but Microsoft is capable of doing it because they do have a partnership with Qualcomm.
Yeah, but it's not the same. I mean, it's that chip is weird to me because, I guess it was a year before that Qualcomm announced that and Qualcomm has split their ARM chips into different families. They make different versions of these chips, not just for different types of smartphones, but also they have specialty chips for like IoT devices, smart speakers, smart watches. They've also branched out into all these different directions, and one of those directions is the PC. And so one of the things that I don't remember the chips, 8CX, I think it was. Those devices were coming out, and there were like two of them, but they were coming out the year that Microsoft announced the Surface Pro X with its own custom SQ1, I think was the name of that chip. Microsoft knew what Qualcomm was doing, and they still made their own chip, with Qualcomm. But I think what they understood was that the market opportunity for Qualcomm was so small that if they didn't take control of this and kind of have a real say in what was happening, the resulting chipset was never going to be good enough. And the SQ1 is almost certainly not good enough either. There's going to be an SQ2 and whatever. We'll see where that goes. But the real fear for any of those guys at Microsoft, Qualcomm, or anyone who is a fan of that stuff is that Apple's going to come out the gate V1 and just get it right. That by doing this in secret for so many years and not shipping products that were heavily handicapped performance-wise or whatever, kind of ruining the brand, right? They'll have an advantage.
Yeah, this is interesting. This is a big move for them, a tremendously large move for them. I'm curious to see how they do it. But again, we don't know how they're going to deploy this. I know.
I know. I can't wait to find out.
They can't turn around and be like, hey, by the way, guys, Intel out. We're just going with this. Unless they do.
Yeah.
Unless they do, and that would be nuts. I don't know if it's in a negative.
I mean, they can't say that. They still have, at the very least, one more year of Intel supplying them with chips. I don't think. Look, even if they're able to go all A series, it's going to be a several-year process. It has to be. It can't. Going to Intel was much easier because those chips were literally better.
Yeah.
This time is an issue.
Listen, they announced this in 2001, right? They went over to Intel. 20 years later, we're looking at a whole different.
No. It was 2005. 2001 was the original version of Mac OS 10.
The original Mac OS, for Intel, yeah.
No,
I thought it
for Intel. No, it's 2005.
2005. Okay.
Yeah.
Why do I think 2001?
That was the first version of OS 10.
Of OS 10. Got it.
Yeah.
So interesting stuff. On the other side, Intel, and it's on Thurrott.com right now. They have a chip that's looking to compete heavily with ARM. This is their newest processor. It's a 10 nanometer, correct?
Very
small.
I'm not entirely sure. So there is one big core that is like a traditional Intel core, core, core series core. That is a 10 nanometer part. There are 4 smaller cores, and this kind of big small architecture is similar, to what ARM does. Those are actually based on the Atom chipset, a new generation of the Atom chipset, and I don't know if they're 10 nanometer or smaller. I'm not sure.
So it's a hybrid essentially.
Yeah.
It's not like a pure ARM chipset. It's a hybrid processor, which is similar to what they do. Samsung, I know, is going to be one of the first to have this in their line.
Yeah. So Samsung at probably CES announced a ARM-based, I think it's a 2-in-1, but laptop, whatever, Galaxy something. I don't remember that. Nobody buys these things. I don't know, but whatever it is, it runs Windows 10 on ARM. And then at some point they announced an Intel-based version, and now we know it's coming out this month, and it's going to run this new Intel chip. And so, without running either one of these things, I think we can speculate that battery life will probably be better on the ARM version, and the performance will probably be better on the Intel version. But regardless of how that works out, the compatibility will be much better on the Intel version. And that's compatibility with apps.
Do you think with all this news, obviously Intel they were not able to make it in the mobile market. That ship has sailed at this point, right? We know that. But now with, go back to the Apple and ARM stuff, and now this, and with AMD, coming out with an unbelievable lineup of chips, Intel's kind of in second place as far as, the necessities go.
Yeah.
This is not.
Yeah, the volume part of the market is thin and light mobile, and look, as far as workhorse chips go, like the U series Intel Core. I guess we're on Gen 10 today. The type of thing you'd find in a laptop, the type of chip I have in my NUC here, absolutely spectacular. Like, it's great. But if you want like a thin, super thin, fanless device that gets like 22 hours of battery life or whatever, you need something a little more efficient. And this has always been the trick, is kind of bridging that gap between performance and efficiency. Qualcomm and Microsoft are kind of trying to scale it up from the bottom. Intel has been working their way down. Intel, I don't know if it's Celeron or Atom or whatever, but they had these chipsets for mobile devices that went absolutely nowhere. You may remember several years ago, there were like a couple of Android tablets that used these chips, and that was about it. It just kind of went nowhere. Their networking business went nowhere. They sold that off. And inexplicably, and this is just an engineering embarrassment, it took Intel several years to move off of 10 nanometer, well, actually off of 14 first, 14, and then to 10. They've had a really hard time scaling their chips down, and it's just been an embarrassment. When you look at the Qualcomm, the Samsung, the Apple stuff, that stuff went 10, 7, 5. Like they're tiny and they're super efficient. Now that little chip that you could get caught between your teeth probably isn't powerful enough to run a computer, which is why they're adapting those things for that purpose. But that's the big part of the market. So I think, Intel, when you think about like the Pro lineup on Apple or any premium PC like HP or Dell or Lenovo, whatever, those devices are probably very lucrative, in that they're high margins, high profits, but they don't sell very much. And then but the mobile devices like phones, tablets, little 2-in-1s, and then this next gen, hopefully we'll see whether it's Windows 10 on ARM or whatever Apple's doing with the Mac. That's the volume part of the market. That's why that's why this failure is so terrible for Intel. They've never seeded the performance thing, although actually maybe they have, right? The new AMD stuff is pretty good. But they've given up the mainstream majority of the market, and it's incredible.
It is incredible. It's incredible. AMD, on the other hand, they've been able to rebound. They had a couple of years
which is
where
also incredible.
I mean, we always joke about it, right, on the show. How do you keep your room warm in the winter? Get a AMD chip. Get a computer
I don't
that's
know.
an AMD chip. But they've been able to really unlock the horsepower battle against Intel, and Intel has fallen behind again.
So I don't remember if I've ever said this publicly, but one of the things that Terry Myerson told me, because I really questioned the decision to move Windows 10 to ARM, was that Microsoft needed some other company to show up and give Intel competition. That if the worst thing that happened was that Intel made its chips more efficient, then fine. Microsoft saw the future as these always on, always connected computers, and Intel was just performance. And he said, look, I'd go AMD, but that company is circling the drain. And that was, 3-4 years ago, whenever that was. But things have really turned around
from 3-4 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, originally their approach to counter Intel was more cores, right?
Yeah.
That's what they were doing. They were doing just more cores, more cores, more cores. These things had, 12 cores, I'm saying years ago.
Right.
When they were doing 8 cores, 12 cores, when Intel was not.
Intel was stuck on 2 or 4,
And Intel was still beating them. They were still able to beat them as far as the overall performance went. But now, not only are these things fast, they're also small chips. I mean, they're doing the 5 nanometer chips, they're doing the 7, they're doing 14. I mean, they have a large variety of chips, but some of these, I mean, these are, like on the server side, for example, there's 64 chips, 64 threads.
I feel like
32-bit chips.
Intel is in risk of turning into IBM.
Who's this, Intel?
Well,
Wait, you're cracking open
Intel,
a beer?
No, it's a sparkling water. In that, they'll still be around, but like these guys they were technology. They were personal computing. They were it. Intel was the microprocessor company.
Yeah.
This ARM stuff has been around for like 30 years. It was nothing for 20 of those years. I mean, nothing.
And they had a chance to develop something. Intel had a great opportunity to develop something.
But the truth is, Intel's failings go back years and years and years. Intel also, when the first tablet PCs were coming out in 2002, Intel didn't have anything that could power those devices efficiently, because obviously for a slate type tablet like an iPad, you don't want fans, but those things all had fans. The Intel chips were terrible. Intel wanted to push the world to Itanium for 64-bit computing, and it was AMD that came around and said, no, we're going to extend x86 with a 64-bit instruction set. It was so popular and so successful, Intel had to adopt AMD's approach. And that's what we're all running today. It's all thanks to AMD.
I mean, look at these.
This is the company that should be the worldwide leader, and it's like I don't know when the last time they were actually leading at anything.
I would say 8 years ago.
Well, I mean, okay,
right? I mean, I'm looking at these Ryzen, the Ryzen Threadripper, for example, right? The 3rd generation one, 64 cores, Paul.
64 cores.
32 cores. Oh, that's just the mid-range one.
Sure.
I mean, it is ridiculously fast. Now, here's the other thing, though. It's not that much faster than an i9. They still have that. They're still suffering with that. And obviously, the Intel chips perform a little bit better, efficiency-wise. But, this is the evolution of this. And I think for Intel, they stayed in the middle. And AMD has gone to one extreme, and the ARM chipsets are another extreme, and Intel is kind of stuck in the middle, treading water.
Yeah. Right. Well, the advantage they have is when you look at a Windows PC today or Mac, I mean, they're necessary. Attempts to use other chipsets so far haven't worked. I mean, AMD has seen some success, obviously, on the Windows side, but by and large, if you look at any PC maker's website, it's 80% Intel at least, depending on the company, and whatever. But the PC market is not what it was, and it's not going to disappear. But 250 to 300 million units a year compared to 2 billion units a year on just phones, And I think when you look at all the devices that ARM chips are selling in, I mean, if you include tablets, IoT, smart home devices, et cetera, I mean, it's billions. It's just billions. And I don't, I've always referred to Intel as kind of the microprocessor giant, but I mean, they probably haven't been number one for several years now. We just didn't notice it happen.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I'm very curious how they do this. Paul, I have a question for you. Okay. Hang on, I had your site open here and I just lost it. Jeez, I'm losing my mind here, Paul. As someone that's kind of in the thick of this, are you getting any AMD-based laptops when you do your reviews, or they're generally all Intel still? Are you seeing a change?
I have not gotten one. It's not impossible that it would happen these days. I mean,
that shift hasn't come to you yet.
It just has not happened to me personally, but they're out there. I mean, obviously they're out there. No, not yet.
Yeah, I'm curious about that because
I'm curious. I'd love to review something like that.
Yeah, and you're not, when we talk about computing, like I'm in the process. I have to build a new production machine, right? That's where I'm at right now. Mm-hmm. And everybody, I put it out there talking about the 10th gen chips that haven't been released fully yet, and it's been a very sloppy deployment for Intel on that side. I still cannot get my hands on the i9 or i7. I guess listen. Obviously, it's due to availability, and there's an issue.
Yeah, I was going to say this is a tough time.
Very tough time. Yep. But when I posted that, everybody's generally, I mean, I would say out of 10, 8 of them were, "Why aren't you buying an AMD?"
Yeah,
and I don't have an answer for that. I don't have an answer because obviously right now I'm using Intel and everything works properly. But I thought that to myself, why am I not using it?
Right.
And it got me thinking, we're not seeing a lot of the conversation around the laptop side. Obviously, on the PC side, we know you can build a awesome gaming machine. But on the laptop side, there's nothing.
I get a lot of, announcement material from PC makers right before they announce new devices. So, Dell has done this. Lenovo, have they done this? Maybe to a lesser degree. HP has done this. Oftentimes, they'll have either the same computer or just they'll call it something different, but where you have a choice of Intel or AMD chips. But that's still kind of the exception. And the problem for AMD is you don't really see one of the companies saying, "Look, this product line is only going to be AMD." Like HP will come out with like a whatever, Envy something, whatever. The Envy line from now on is only going to be AMD. Like you just don't see that. And maybe it's a capacity problem. Maybe AMD is just not big enough. But I do think it's interesting and it's notable that a lot of those companies, the biggest ones especially, are at least making AMD available as an option where they think people might choose those. If you go back and look at, for example, I think HP, Lenovo both recently had gaming PC announcements. I bet you will find AMD options in there if you want them.
Oh, I'm sure it's there.
Yeah, but they won't be AMD only. Like you won't find one that's just AMD, probably.
Talking about gaming, today it's a PS5 announcement.
I know, I can't wait.
At what, 4 o'clock? Right?
4 o'clock.
4 p.m. East?
Yep.
Give us what you think, your thoughts on this.
There's been a lot of information. This is like the Apple thing. There's a lot of we don't know yet. So I think when you look at the next generation of video game consoles, what we're going to find overall is that the PS5 and the Xbox Series X are probably pretty similar. Sony made a lot of news when they had that Unreal Engine demo, but Unreal Engine's going to work on Xbox too, right? So, one of the things that Microsoft mentioned just yesterday is they have games because they're running. Of course they are, because it's not PlayStation specific. But that demo was really impressive, and it was apparently running on a PS5. And I think the game demos that we're going to see later today are likewise going to be really impressive. So I always hold up this thing that Microsoft has still said as recently as yesterday, although when pressed, they kind of take a little step back. But I think the point of this generation literally is 4K all the time, 60 frames a second or better all the time. And the way I would rate these consoles will be the percentage of games that actually achieve that in real life on either one. So, we'll see. But there'll be games with higher refresh rates or frame rates.
This thing's going to be a beast. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Do we know what they're doing with augmented reality and that kind of?
No, we know Microsoft stuff is not doing it at all. And Sony has actually seen some success with VR. The PSVR stuff has sold in the millions, and so I would assume that they're going to do something, but that doesn't seem like the type of thing that they would release day one. There's so much, just the process of getting this thing out the door, I think, and getting enough games is probably going to be the focus for this year. But you could picture next year or maybe the year after there being a PS5 VR, at least VR solution.
Yeah, this is going to be, this generation is no longer about content consumption on these devices. These are strictly gaming machines at this point.
Yes,
I think both of them
true.
saw. You know what's interesting? Sony was very successful with going towards the content-driven side with the PS3. I think for many people that was a major selling point for them is that this thing was a Blu-ray player. Same thing with the PlayStation 2. That was a DVD player. That is gone. Microsoft was a great example of how not to do it when it came to their fan base. They realize that people don't care about consuming media on this. They just want to play the games. Sure. And Sony was quick to adapt to that with the PlayStation 4, and Microsoft got there.
But you know what? The world is so different today. People consume media in very specific ways now, and look, those apps will all appear in the consoles, whatever. But booting up a Battleship to watch Netflix is not the best way to do it. So you have a little silent device of any kind. You could have your TV probably has it built in. So that's a much more efficient way to do that. I will say one of the things that's going to be interesting in this generation of consoles, aside from the performance and graphics quality and all that, is that both of these sides will always have like the exclusive content and yada, yada, yada and all that stuff. But the games that are cross-platform, which is the vast majority, we're going to see a lot more cross-play, I think, this gen. And that's something that finally started happening pretty late in the game in the current gen, but we're going to see a lot more of that in the next gen. And that's, things like, Call of Duty guys on PlayStation 5 and Xbox. Why on earth would they not be playing against each other, or integrated, whatever, in whatever fashion in multiplayer games? I think we're going to see a lot more of that. So I think that helps take kind of the heat off in some ways. I mean, some guys will always go Sony because of particular games, or they just like the brand, whatever. And some guys will always go Microsoft for the same reason. But, for the guys or gals, whatever, people who are playing the majority of games, especially games that are collaborative or, fighting games or multiplayer games, whatever. Why not? Let them play, let them play against each other. Yeah. I think that should be a nice trend.
Yeah. I do like the overall design choice for, I'm just going through these photos, the controller design, they've done a good job with this,
but it looks nice.
Listen, it's going to be, this thing's going to sell by the millions. So I don't think anybody's concerned with it.
Hopefully the world, picks up itself from this disaster, moves on, but I suspect whatever they're able to make, they're going to sell. You're not going to see PlayStation 5 sitting on shelves anywhere.
No. Before we wrap it up, I had something else here. Paul, do you have anything before we wrap it up and go into our bonus show? Anything that I'm listening to?
No, I mean, Android 11 beta 1's out. I just installed it on the phone. I'm going to I'll take a look at that after the show. I don't think that's a monumental thing, but I hope it was obvious from what we talked about earlier. I'm really excited about what Apple's going to announce. And one of the things I'm curious about is, like, Microsoft Build was just available to everybody. Apple has a developer program you have to buy into to get, access to betas and stuff like that. And a lot of the WWDC, most of the WWDC content in the past has been restricted to those people. Yeah. So in the past, you used to be able to go see the build sessions on video. Anyone could do it later. I hope that Apple is going to open that stuff up to everyone. I'm going to go try to figure that out after the show too. I'd like to see that be open. I'm really curious about, what their plans are on the developer side. But yeah, I mean, that's most of it.
All right.
That's where my head's at.
That's where your head's at. Mine too. Guys, if you want to listen to our bonus show, we're going to record this live right after this. You go to patreon.com/whatthetech. You can fund us there as little as $1 per episode. You get access to this bonus stuff that we do. For all things Paul, go to Thurrott.com. It is pouring here, by the way. Holy moly. Go to Thurrott.com for all things Paul. You can follow Paul on Thurrott, at Thurrott on Twitter. You can follow me at Andrew Zarian. And, of course, remember to subscribe to the podcast. We're everywhere podcasts are available, including YouTube. If you're watching this, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and call it a day. All right, guys. We'll see you all next time. Take care.
Excuse me.
There we go. All right. Let me now do...
boy.
All right. Let's do a bonus show. What do you say?
Sure.
All right. All right. Let me go here, and I'll record in 3, 2, and 1. Hi, everybody. Welcome to What the Talk. This is our bonus show. We recorded live each and every week exclusively on patreon.com/whatthetech. I'm joined by Paul Thurrott. How you doing, Paul?
You know, pretty good.
Yeah, this is
hanging in there. What do we say these days?
Last week, I didn't want to do a show with everything going on. There's a little insanity here and everything going on, but we're here today. And, we were talking about on the show, we were talking about Microsoft's, Apple's move, I should say, not Microsoft. Well, Microsoft's making some moves too. Their move to go into an ARM-based chipset. And it is interesting, the technology since we've begun doing this, it has such ebbs and flows of, growth and evolution. And I always go back to like 2011. That was a big time for growth with the iPad and the iPhone dominating and really becoming the force in mobile computing as we know it today.
Right.
Maybe something like this is the next dive into this. You're always thinking about what's the next thing that's going to be created, the next thing that's going to be this big boom. We saw it with the tablets and the iPad, and to be honest, nobody's been able to do it other than Apple. Nobody figured it out. And I actually, that is a real fascinating thing that nobody was able to figure it out like they did. And I don't understand why. Why wasn't...
Think of all the companies that could and should have figured this out. Amazon sells these Fire HD tablets. Samsung, obvious. Google used to have tablets people loved. Remember the Nexus 7?
Yeah.
It's inexcusable, but yeah, this is why Apple's success with the iPad and its success in getting developers to adapt their apps to the iPad or make new apps to the iPad is one of the reasons why their transition to ARM is so interesting, because they've been successful at rallying the troops in the past in ways that Microsoft and the Android, Google/Android, have not. So yeah, I can't actually 100% explain, but today when someone says, should I get this or that? It's like, look, if you're getting a tablet, you get an iPad. Like there is no good second choice. There just isn't.
Well, you know what I think it was? I think for Amazon had a real great opportunity with the Kindle line, right? The Kindle Fire line. But the problem was they concentrated on consumption of media rather than apps. And I think for a segment of their user base, that was exactly what they wanted. But you're coming over from the Apple side, you're gonna say this thing sucks, and they do suck. Those Kindle,
they're terrible.
Those little, like the inexpensive ones, they are abysmal. They're barely usable, and I'm not making a joke here. I'm not exaggerating.
No, they're terrible.
Do you know how many of them I've attempted to use and try?
Me too. And look, I'm a goon. Every time a new one comes out, I start pricing it out. Like it's like this thing's less than $100. I should just grab one. It's like, that's stupid. You're never going to use this. Like this is terrible.
Yeah. So that didn't work. I think Google's problem was they just didn't have the dedication for it, because remember at the time when that Nexus came out, the Nexus 7 came out, that first one, people really were excited for it. But was the Nexus 7 the one that the apps weren't properly scaled for the tablet? And you had all these issues running these applications. I'm trying to remember if that was it. Because I do remember
back then most of the apps were probably phone apps. And of course, like
and zoomed in.
The Nexus 7 screen today is not that much bigger than a phone screen. But at the time, it seemed, it was big compared to a phone. So yeah, I don't remember that. There were two versions of it. I had both. I thought they were both great. I know both suffered from performance rot over time, which was an early problem with Android that's pretty much gone these days.
Bit rot.
But yeah, there was a 10-inch version. Remember the Nexus 10 that kind of went nowhere. And then they did nothing with tablets for a while. And then they tried, I think it was Pixel C might have been the next one. And that bombed. And then whatever that Slate thing they released, they kind of moved to Chrome OS.
So who else? Yeah. I mean, Samsung is still, they're the only ones still doing it to a large scale.
And they make, by the way, so Samsung makes nice looking tablets. I mean, I will say 7, 8, 10, whatever the sizes are, different line, they make a crazy number of them actually, but the problem isn't the hardware, it's the software. And look, whatever anyone thinks about iOS versus Android, whatever, I prefer Android, but I will say, by and large, it is a fair statement that most apps, if the app is on both platforms, which most apps are, the iOS version is almost always better. When you move to tablets, this is an uncontestable fact. For some reason, the Android developer base, I guess, has just never really rallied around this platform on tablets or bigger screen devices. And there's so many Android apps that just are terrible in that form factor. And on the iPad, they're wonderful. And that is night and day. It's a huge problem.
A tremendous problem.
I don't know how you fix it. It just never happened. I don't know why.
I always find that and you know what? You talk to an Android hardcore user, and they will tell you that's not what we're saying is not true. These are great devices.
I don't care what they're saying. So they're wrong. And I very much prefer Android to iOS. Very much.
I would love to be able to 100%.
Yep. I would use an Android tablet immediately if it was anywhere near as good. It could be 75% as good. It's not even close. I use an iPad. I'm sorry. I wish it was. And it's so bad that Google moved to Chrome OS for tablets, right? The Chrome OS runs iOS, Android apps. We're going to use this platform instead. And that platform is also terrible. So, whatever. I just don't look, I'm not a closed book here. I mean, I try everything. I would, and I prefer Android. I don't know how else to say this. I'm sorry. Anyone who thinks this is not a world where there are different opinions.
No,
I'm sorry.
I think here's the issue here, right? I think especially with you.
Yeah.
Here's the problem with you, Paul.
Here we go.
Here we go. Do you know what this is?
I've been dying
I'm doing
for this
it
show,
now.
please,
Guys, I'm doing
out.
it finally. This is the moment.
Okay.
The problem with you is that you've been attached to the Windows side for so long, where people have this and you're a shill, and you're an Apple, you're a Microsoft.
Yes.
But
yes, both of
in all
those,
seriousness, I don't think people. I think we started doing the show, and I think for a lot of people, it opened them up to what you actually use and what you actually think of Apple products and Android products.
Yeah,
I think for the longest time, because you do a Windows-based show with Leo, and primarily it's stuck to talking about Microsoft and Windows because Leo has 10,000 other shows talking about everything else. So this was the focus of this. I don't think people were aware on how open you are to using other products other than the Microsoft stuff. I really, I think one thing that I've contributed here is that I've opened people up to realizing that, holy crap, Paul actually does use a Mac. He uses an iPad. He uses Android. You use everything. Right. You and I, our daily usage is nearly identical, other than the fact that I use a MacBook Pro at work, and you probably use whatever you're using. Whatever Surface device or HP device. That's what you're using. But it's fascinating to see people's perception compared to what in reality, your honest to God thoughts on those products.
A lot of people,
But since
a lot of
people
people focus
Thurrott,
on one thing.
Since creating Thurrott.com, you cover everything.
Yeah, and look, for example, when Windows Phone was a going concern, I cared very much about it. I preferred it, but at some point, Windows Phone became less good, than what was available in Android and iOS. And there was a several year period there where I think a lot of other fans of that platform were in denial, and they would say, "Well, yeah, but live tiles are better. This is better," and blah blah blah. And it's like, you're not focusing on what's important. The apps are all over in this other thing, and I'm sorry, whatever remaining advantages you may have on this platform you love so much are not what matters. And So I was, I feel like I was a little early on that one and was correct, as it turns out, because obviously the platform failed. But yeah, I go back and forth. I mean, in front of me literally is I'm using a Huawei phone, which is crazy for someone who lives in the United States. And there's an iPhone charging here. But I go back, I evaluate these things. I go back and reevaluate them. You can read the review I wrote of the latest iPhone that, dates back to last year sometime. And then you can read the thing I wrote about it a couple of months ago when I started using it again on a daily basis to, just to keep my mind fresh with, because there are certain advantages and there are certain disadvantages. Whatever. I would use an iPhone. I have many years used an iPhone as my phone. Goes back and forth. I just use what's best for me, whatever it is.
Yeah. And that's how
right now it's Android on phones.
Was there ever a platform that you thought was going to kind of rise and it fell apart? I would say, like the Amazon stuff. That would be one.
Millions.
Give me one from the current.
Not millions. Many.
Currently.
Well,
era, the last 10 years, let's say.
Oh, the last 10 years.
Yeah.
I will say I thought that Google would have overtaken Amazon in the smart home space, and they haven't. That one surprised me. I mean, I thought Windows Phone was a big deal. Like now we're going back almost 10 years now, but I thought Windows Phone was it. Like I thought they had it. Like I thought that was the right response. It might have been a year late or whatever, but a year is a year, whatever. The big question there was whether the market could handle 3 ecosystems. BlackBerry was failing. It turns out they can't. So, whatever. I mean, I was a big fan of BOS, a million years ago, mid 90s. I mean, late 90s. I thought that was going to be the next thing. And it could have been if Apple had bought them and they bought Next. I always fascinated by Next. Next was a huge failure. The Newton, I was always fascinated by, a huge failure. The Amiga, a million years ago.
The Amiga is one that comes to mind.
It is incalculable how much better that was than a Mac or PC of the day. And Commodore was the worst company on earth. So whatever. But the last few years, no, I mean things have really kind of settled down in the personal computing space in a way. Tablets were going to take over for PCs, and then they didn't. The Mac was going to rise again, and then it didn't. I don't know. I day to day, I do prefer the PC. I understand the allure of Macs. I love Macs. I mean, I love them. Not a huge fan of the operating system, but the hardware is. I mean, I completely understand. But I like stuff that just works. I have a really efficient workflow in Windows. I prefer Windows. I mean, Android, iOS, I could go back and forth. If Apple made a couple of basic changes to iOS, I mean, I would have no complaints at all.
One thing that comes to mind, it's Linux, right? You go
Linux,
go back a little, go back beyond 10 years. Go a little, go 15 years ago.
No, Linux is a good one. I remember when my career started, I was working at and going to Scottsdale Community College, and I remember I worked in one of the computer labs. And Linux was just happening, and there was something called Slackware Linux, which was like a floppy-based distribution. And so you used to download these disk images, and then you could write them out to the floppies, and you'd have a stack of them, And as you installed it through this text-based interface, it would say insert disk. They had names like S1, T2, whatever they were. And it was hard to install, and getting the the X window system up. The graphics was really hard. But as a technical person, I kind of enjoyed that challenge, and I saw whatever it was called at the time, that whatever became Open Office, and I remember thinking, how could Microsoft compete with something that was free? Especially if the operating system and this Office productivity suite, if it just did like 20% of what Windows and Office did, but it was the 20% that everybody needed, and it was free, like why wouldn't this take off? And I don't write about this a lot. I have a couple of article series kind of pending that I might write about, but one of the things I experiment with regularly is Linux. And I was using Elementary OS on an HP 15-inch laptop recently. I've used recent versions of Ubuntu and Mint with Cinnamon and different. I try these things. But Linux for me has always, like Chrome, actually, I would say Chromebook is another example of this, right? This thing, like maybe this is the future. But Linux and Chromebook have left me a little cold in both cases every time.
Well, you know what I think it is, like right
and
now.
I've just never been able to make that transition.
Right, like if you attempt it now, which I really want to, I just need to have the time right now to do this. But like Ubuntu 20, whatever the latest one, 2004 or whatever the latest version.
2004 probably, yeah.
This is not the same Ubuntu of 10 years ago. You know, the difficulties of going from Windows or from a Mac to Ubuntu Linux-based system.
Well,
a lot of these things that you had to do to install it and to get applications and to use terminal, you don't need to.
Yeah,
these are full-fledged operating systems for the Linux.
They have app stores and
They've simplified this.
Remember when Mac OS 10 came out, one of the capabilities that Apple added to the system, which they don't do because they feel like doing it, this is obviously a necessity, is they had a boot camp program where you could dual boot with Windows, right? Maybe was boot camp on the PowerPC versions, or was that Intel? I don't remember. It doesn't matter. But the boot camp still exists, still there. So obviously this was a need. But one of the big things that has changed in the past 15 years or whatever is that most of the apps that most people use are on the web now. So the friction of moving from like Windows to Mac has actually gone down dramatically. Plus, it helps that Microsoft Office is there. But you could just use whatever's on that platform. If a lot of Mac guys probably use the iWork stuff or whatever, Pages and Numbers and whatever. And that's fine. Safari is first-class web browser. It's great. Chrome or Chromium is available on every platform. So there is an argument to be made, given that this is the way the world has gone. If Linux is easy enough to use, it's free. You could put it on any computer. It would probably just work. Hopefully just work. You could run all those apps. You can Edge is coming. Chrome is not really there. It's Chromium, right? So Chrome, I think it's Chromium on Linux, but you could also run Firefox and other web browsers. I mean, this could work. I mean, and even for like a Microsoft guy like me, we know that a Microsoft shill, as you say, we know that Microsoft is bringing the Edge web browser to Linux. That would make that platform more appealing to me. If they could do, I'm sure Dropbox, whatever is available, Google Drive might be available. I don't know, but OneDrive is not available. If I could OneDrive sync to Linux like I can on Windows or the Mac, that would be another blocker out of the way, you know? And I don't know, we're pretty close, you know, but still, I literally, I was just using this platform the other day. There's something about Linux. It just doesn't do it for me.
But on the Linux side, there's so many, like if you want to talk about overall UI design, there are some stunning UIs for some of these distros. Zorian is a great looking operating system. Elementary is another great looking operating system. There's so many of them. Pop OS.
There's almost too many of them, by the way. I think that's one of the issues. Like, you know, when you run Windows, you whether you like it or not, I mean, this is the look, you know, and I happen to like it, but whatever. When you run Mac OS, that's the look is one choice. You get Mac OS, you know, and it's fine. It's not, you know, some stuff about it I don't like, but whatever, it's fine, you know. When you go to Linux, you're like, oh man, there's like 127 choices here. If you look at just Ubuntu, like the several variants, there's X Ubuntu, there's you know, there's all these different, because it's all different, like window managers or UIs or whatever they call them, and just knowing which one to choose. And then there are different they probably call them app stores a lot of times now, but what you're basically talking about is like an app repository of some kind that has a graphical front end, and there are at least 3 major different versions of those available for Linux. And which one do you want? And which, you know, like it's still a little technical. I mean, they've solved a lot of the basic blockers or issues or whatever, but there's almost too many choices, you know.
There's a lot
of, like when you go into,
that might sometimes hurt you. Maybe that's one of the reasons. I think there's a lot of weirdness. You know what? I'm going to install. I'm trying to think what computer I could install this on. You recommend installing it on one of my Surface 3 devices?
No, I don't. one of the things I know this is true in like a virtual environment. Well, no, I haven't had any issue. I was going to say sometimes the secure firmware stuff gets to be a problem, like secure boot, whatever. But no, I wouldn't put it on a Microsoft device. I don't know. The HP thing I was using was okay. I know, Lenovo's going to start officially supporting Linux on all of its workstations, not its like ThinkPads, but ThinkStations and stuff. That's interesting. Dell sells a version of the XPS 13 that comes with Linux. So if you had like a Dell computer, the drivers are probably all there or whatever. I don't know. I'm not really sure what the best choice is. I suspect the web would have the answer to this question. I don't know. I'd be interested in trying to run Mac OS on a PC just to see what that's like.
I've done it, dude. Yeah. I've done it many times. And I got to tell you, I at first thought it was, hey, Nick in our chat, why did Microsoft not buy BlackBerry instead of Nokia? That's a good question. $2 donation.
Well, it's because Nokia was running it was the only major phone maker running their platform. If they had not bought Nokia would have switched to Android and it would have killed Windows Phone.
Maybe Nokia would still be here in a very large capacity.
Maybe, yeah.
But
so
you know what? BlackBerry,
that's
great
why.
example. Great example. BlackBerry, right? BlackBerry was a king of smartphones. In a smartphone, not by today's standard, but a smartphone nonetheless.
In North America, they were the single biggest maker.
They were the ones, and they had the security for enterprise. They had everything in place, and this is a great example of not evolving fast enough. They had that ridiculous. First of all, they made tremendous amounts of mistake. The dual CEO concept failed, which was ridiculous. Yeah. Then they had the 10-year plan that they stuck with and refused to.
Well, they did that technology transition to, was it BlackBerry 10? I think it was. That took a while. They everyone did this. Motorola, Palm, BlackBerry RIM at the time, Nokia, all responded very slowly to iPhone, and they all thought it was going to fail. They all thought it wasn't going to work. They all mocked it, And they did at first kind of half-hearted, remember the BlackBerry Storm, I think, was the first touch device from them that had like the haptic feedback in the screen. It was a little goofy. It's the problem.
I waited online to get that phone, by the way, Paul. I waited online. Yeah. I'll never forget it. I waited online, and the Storm came out before the Motorola Droid.
Yep.
Or was it after? Motorola Droid came out November. I'm going to give you a number. I'm going to give you a date, okay? Swear to God, I didn't look this up. I could be wrong. Yep. For whatever reason, I'm thinking November 9th for the Black.
I don't know the exact date, but what year was it? 2009?
2009. I say Motorola.
The reason I remember this is I was on a work trip, and remember that the Motorola Droid was a real industrial looking thing. It was kind of robotic and masculine, and it was real, but it was real hard edges and real masculine, and the ads were like about explosions, and and I remember my wife. I don't remember how she told me. She either called me or texted me.
My God, Paul!
She's like,
I was off by 3 days. November 6th, 2009.
And was it 2009? Yeah. So I must have been. I was probably at PDC that year. It would have been late October. But my wife communicated to me somehow. She's like, "I'm going to buy a Motorola Droid," and I was like, "What?" I was like, "Why?" I couldn't believe it. I'm like, "You're a woman. Why would you want this?" That's crazy.
What are you? What are you, a man?
Yeah, but she's been on Android ever since. I mean,
so I got this to replace my HTC Touch Pro, which was Windows Phone, Windows Mobile, and I was gung ho on Windows Phone, on Windows Mobile.
Yeah,
Windows Mobile 6 and 6.5. I was gung ho on this. 6.5 was going to fix all the problems. It was going to be competitive. This is it, and then they released this device. So I waited online. I got it. The keyboard on this thing was atrocious. It was going from the HTC to this night and day. This was terrible. And it had like almost like a trackpad, right? It had
that's right. A little ball. It was like a ball thing. Yeah, like a little. Yeah.
What a bizarre device this was. But this device was responsible for, one, my career, technically. Because I did these tips and tricks videos for the Motorola Droid when it came out. Paul, 500,000 views, 300,000 views. This thing was people were dying to know how to use this thing.
Wow.
It just showed you the excitement of a new device. But this thing, I think this was a device that catapulted Android more than anything else.
Oh no, it is. That's a fact. Yeah, and the story of how they chose to name it Droid and they got permission to use that name from Lucasfilm is one of the things that put it over the top. And the design, like I said, that was super masculine. It was a huge disappointment to Google when they started. They couldn't believe it. They wanted something elegant and beautiful like the iPhone. And so the same marketing team or company, whatever it was that came up with the name, was like, well, we'll just market it like this big masculine war device. Like it's, if you go back and look it up,
bombs
you'll see like
blowing up, robots, space war.
Like, yep. And it will just emphasize this is it's gonna make the iPhone look like the sissy phone, like that. Like that's how we're gonna market it. And it was a huge success.
By the way, I want to tell you something that people don't remember.
X.
Something that people don't remember here. People don't remember, and I'm curious if you remember this. They were this close of being the Xerox of Android, because there were so many people around that time, and Motorola was. They would just they started referring to all Android phones as droids.
Oh, it's droids.
That's one point. Not Motorola, but like in general, people would say, oh, I have a droid and not an Android. They were
That's right.
This
No,
close.
that marketing campaign was so successful. And there was I think there was a real pent up need, not just from like the wireless carriers and hardware makers, but for customer, like, people, for there to be some alternative to the iPhone. And when that arrived, it was like, yep. Like to a certain percentage. I mean, there will always be people who are drawn to that Apple style, whatever. But there were just like there are some. It's like I want a Camry. It's like, no, I want an F-150 pickup, and I want it to be extra high and it have a snow shovel, like a snowplow on the front. Like those people are like, I want a Droid. Like this thing looks like a masculine, manly device.
Very underrated campaign, product campaign. Nick.
Oh no,
this is. Another $5 donation. Look at this, Paul. It's going to pay for my beer later. My reason for asking is that BlackBerry and Microsoft were essentially in the same market, he says. You could have BB Messenger and, you could have had everything essentially combined together. I agree with you. I think this would have been a great get for them if they were able to do it and deploy it. It just wasn't for sale at the time. But QNX is another thing for BlackBerry. QNX
That's right.
was really big, and I think for most people, I think still most cars are running QNX, right?
Yeah, somewhere in the dashboard. Yeah, so if I'm not, I could be wrong about all this, but if I'm not mistaken, I think BlackBerry 10 was based on QNX, wasn't it? Like that was that whole transition they made. I think
that was the transition.
And so QNX was like a real-time operating system used in embedded devices and stereo systems.
People don't realize this. BlackBerry's still making a tremendous amount of money with this, considering the fact that as of 2018, 120 million vehicles it's running QNX. All the infotainment systems, no matter if it's Jaguar or BMW or they're running QNX as the back end still, and the technology works really well. I think people are forgetting that. This is a big deal. This is a big movement for them, and a big deal.
You don't ever see a powered by QNX thing when a device comes up. Like it's just something.
No, it's just the back end.
It's plumbing. It's like the back end. But
because they have something that a lot of other companies have not been able to get. And so in the car world, everything you can't have a car reset when you're driving. You know what I mean? It's not. It's not like at home. So they have something they go by automotive grade. So every piece of hardware and software running in a vehicle has to be graded to a different standard. It can't just be putting a computer in there, putting an iPad in there. They were one of the first and one of the only ones to get this automotive grade reliability when it came to running the car.
I think BlackBerry probably purchased this company, right? I don't think QNX started at BlackBerry. I think
remember.
QNX was a standalone company.
Was a standalone company, yeah. Let me see here. It started.
It was a very specific thing. It was like an RTOS.
QNX started in 1982.
Okay.
Initial release was 1982. It was a Canadian company. It was acquired by BlackBerry in 2010. Yeah. Wow, this is wild.
Pretty late in the game, actually.
Yeah. So these guys have been around for a long time. Imagine that. As a microkernel-based OS, QNX is based on the idea of running most of the operating system in a kernel, blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, these guys have been around for a very long time. It's fascinating how it went into the vehicle.
Yeah.
Everything changes.
Yep.
Ford replaced them. Microsoft replaced Microsoft Auto with QNX.
Yep.
So, that's interesting.
Ford Sync.
Ford Sync. Yeah. Not
was
great.
The Microsoft thing. Yeah.
I'm going to tell you, not my favorite.
Yeah.
Not my favorite. I think there's a lot of these. I think there's a tremendous amount of these. I think LG's still using WebOS, right? In their TVs.
Yeah. I mean, whatever that means. It's just WebOS. Actually, there's another one. I mean, you asked like things that should have taken off and failed. I mean, Palm, they had WebOS, and what was that first thing called? The little phone with the Pebble or something on it with the little the Palm Pre. Yeah. They just ran out of money,
And the Palm, you know what? If they didn't run out of money, I'm telling you, they would have been in a very they would have been positioned still, in my opinion.
Yeah. So the guy who that interface, so I'm trying to look this up now because I want to remember this guy's name, but the person who invented that user experience, there's a guy. Anyway, the guy who was responsible for that, whatever his name is. I apologize, I can't remember. He later went to Google, and he's the guy that worked up Material Design 2, and he's in charge of all the Google UX stuff now. Yeah. So that guy ended up on the winning team, kind of belatedly, but there was some really nice UI innovation in that system when it first launched. I mean, compared to what iPhone was doing. And it's just one of those many tragedies of our industry. It didn't work out.
They still exist. They're still here.
Yeah, whatever that means.
They're in the TVs, right? The latest release is LG TV 5.0. That's running WebOS. They have an open source version. HP Touchpad. The HP Slate, I remember. Oh my god.
No, those are all well gone. But yeah, HP owned them briefly and made a.
You know what? We're talking about a platform that I thought would do well. This is it for me. That's how we went down this rabbit hole, right? Which I'm enjoying this, and I think we got to wrap it up soon. But I think I'll release this as it's for free for everybody because I think the discussion was cool. This is my pick. It was really Palm. I was on that Palm bandwagon for a very long time.
Oh yeah,
I thought when
I've owned so many of those things.
Yep. I thought HP was going to be able to do something with this, and they didn't due to the state that HP was in 2009, 2010. Really. But this is it's one of those tech tragedies where what could have happened with Palm OS? What could have happened when they went over to this?
Yeah, that's true.
Palm Pre was a nice little phone, man. I remember when it came out, the hype around this phone was tremendous.
Yeah, they like I said, they ran out of money. They were done. John Rubinstein, who was one of the major players in the iPod stuff at Apple, went to lead that company and led the design of this product. And you can find the video of them introducing it. He does it. It's very much like a Steve Jobs keynote, but not with Steve Jobs. So it's not quite. You can, unfortunately, John Rubinstein, he's genius. He's a little stiff compared to Steve Jobs, who isn't. But yeah, that should have, that could have been.
It could have been another
the Amiga of smartphones, Andrew. I'm going to call it right now.
I went down an Amiga rabbit hole the other day because of you, and I got to tell you, the graphical interface, what they were able to do at the time that they were doing it, it really is shocking, right?
Yeah.
It really is shocking because I got to tell you,
all these years later, that's the biggest defeat.
In 1989, 1990, I got a Tandy. That was my first computer. And what was going on in the Amiga world compared to what I had with Deskmate, night and day.
Yep.
I mean,
you had the equivalent of like the Apollo, processor on your.
Yeah, the Lost. There was a video I watched. It was called "The Lost Operating Systems," and it was Tandy's Deskmate 3. and it was a look back at what it was, and there was really they were trying to compete with Windows. That was the purpose of this. I think with Windows 3. And my God, it was the most hideous thing. The graphical interface on this thing was hideous for even for its time. It was disgusting. I can't believe I used to use this thing. How the hell did I figure this out as a kid? I'll never forget it. My parents just put a computer in my room and they said, "Learn this."
Right.
I have no idea. Like, I was using this. I remember I was printing out stuff for my dad for the Gulf War. So that has to be 1989, 1990, right? I was 4. I was 5. I was 5 years old. I was a genius, Paul. What happened?
A genius.
That's what getting stoned and drinking does.
Right.
That's the problem here. It's very interesting, though. I'm gonna go with before we wrap it up. I'm gonna go with the Palm, with WebOS and Palm, Palm Pre as what could have been. That's gonna be my pick. What do you go with? I want to know what you go with.
The Amiga is the all-time champion. It just is. They were so far ahead, and that company also ran out of money. They had to sell a Commodore. That kept that technology out of the hands of Atari and Jack Trammell, and that was probably the right decision, I guess. But Commodore, just the most horribly managed company on earth. It was basically a pyramid scheme. It's crazy. They just ran it into the ground, and they could have really owned it all. It's sad. As
a gaming platform, they were unbelievable.
Yep. Yeah, the whole thing was great.
I mean, you look at what they were doing. It's unbelievable. Unbelievable. Great stuff. All right, Paul. Let's wrap it up, guys. That was a lot of fun. I'll see you all next time. Take care. All right, thank you, guys. Thanks, Nick, in the chat. Thank you for the donations. I got invited somewhere today, Paul.
Okay. Could you be a little more specific?
For a very secret event.
Okay.
I got invited to a very private gathering at an establishment to have a couple of drinks today.
Okay.
Now, I'm not going to say where it is because then they'll get in trouble.
Okay. Then
it's a 10-person invite. It's a 10-person invite, and it's a whiskey tasting.
Nice.
I'm going there now. I'm gonna go put on my makeup, put on my heels, and get ready.
Huh. We'll have fun out in the world.
It's gonna be. Listen, person. I need it, man. I gotta. The stuff that I'm dealing with right now, is we're still live, but I'm not recording. I manage a very large hospitality group here in New York.
Yeah.
And we're trying to figure out a way how the hell we're going to open, considering what the business is.
Yep. It's going to be like those, the red light district where someone's behind a sheet of glass and the curtain comes down and you have to pay more to have the curtain go back up.
If I told you that that's not out of the equation here as options.
Well, I mean, what else are you gonna do? Jeez, I mean,
it's gonna be. We're a restaurant, so we'll be fine. We're gonna be able to open. It's just a matter of how do you go. This is the new norm now, right? Like, how do you do this? Be in this industry, and and survive with the new requirements. Oh God, I hope to see you soon, man. I really do. I hope that,
I was just telling Mary. I talked to Mary Jo yesterday or the day before, and if you had asked me a month ago, I would have been like, I'm not going to New York this year. It's just not going to happen. But I can see it. I could see it happening.
Yeah. Well, I thought about it. I mean, I'll come to Pennsylvania and visit you.
Yeah, you'd be a lot safer here. I can tell you that.
I should do that. I could take the bus from the city, right?
Yeah, I mean, I could probably just pick you up in Newark or whatever.
Where?
Like, just get to the Newark airport. Well, or take the train there or whatever, however you get there.
How far are you from Newark?
Like an hour and 20 minutes.
Oh, then I could do this drive. How long have you done the drive to New York?
Yeah, it's like 2 hours.
Oh, I would rather than do the drive. I could do a drive and do like a couple days there. Yeah.
That's fine.
People don't realize we're friends. Guys, Paul and I are friends.
Andrew, I have invited you here so many times.
I know.
I'm tired of you spurning me.
I know. It's dude, it's the insanity with kids.
But yeah, this is not a bad place to be right now. I can tell you that.
No,
So,
I'll tell you off the air, obviously, about the insanity that's going on here. But dude, it's crazy. All right, guys, I'll see you next time. Hang on, let me kill.